Really fun having the kids here today, and it has really been good. Thank you for the entertaining way of teaching us a song, and I just think it's showing that we are a big family, that we're not just individuals in here, but we actually are a spiritual community, awakening to our divine nature through love, service, and personal transformation, and listening to joy songs. And so it's working really well, and I want to thank them for doing that. I have one announcement. Hank and Beth Wall are putting together a group that will extend the amount of fun we have after church. And he would like y'all, anybody who's interested, to meet him upstairs at 12:30 in the conference room. Beth and Hank are great hosts, and if you want to join them in having some fun, I would suggest it. And now for my first joke. No. We're working with this book. Many of you have this book, many of you in the book study. This book is the book by Michael Gadway called Journey to Remembrance. And what this book is really is a primer in yogic philosophy and practice. And as Michael did last week, he said, why don't you pick something and do it for 3 months straight? And the one he suggested, the one he was doing, was friendliness. And he said, you know, it's amazing. You go determined to be friendly, and the first thing that you're going to notice is that not everybody's friendly back, and you have to deal with that. All of this and many of the other practices that he's doing is really an antidote to the sense of a separate sense of I that keeps us from being in the presence of the one as the one, keeps us from being at peace, keeps us isolated and alone, causes most of the trouble in the world, between people at least. And the antidotes are really important because we have been trained from childhood to be a person. Not that that was a bad thing, or maybe it was. But we are trained to be a person. So I just did this workshop yesterday with Richard Lang, and I've tried to tell you all to do it. We didn't have that many people from our church. We had about 30 people, most of them they know him from online or some other place, but they had come, and I was trying to think of a comparison for it. And much of the spiritual practice we do takes time and a lot of intention to get there. And it was sort of like getting a tan. You know, it takes a while to get the tan, unless you burn yourself, which you don't want to do. Or this was more like a tanning bed. It was like, oh my gosh. And what it was asking of you was something so incredibly simple. But I've never been able to do a great job of it where people go, oh yeah, I get what you're talking about. But I'm going to give you a hint by the practice you could do while we're sitting here. And that hint is this. If you're like me, typically I have kind of a narrow field of vision. It's about this big, right? Sometimes smaller. And I'm looking at something and I'm focusing on it. You with me so far? Now there's another form of vision which is called peripheral vision, in which you expand your awareness not so much to this thing but to this here. And as you expand your attention out like this is my experience, then so does your consciousness kind of expand. It follows your eyesight. Right? You with me? So if you will do this, I believe, especially since we did a little bit of heart meditation, that you will begin to find that you're in the middle of the awareness and not just looking at something, but you start to become the awareness itself. You know, your awareness, you're not, the awareness is on awareness, not on that, not on a thing, but on awareness itself. And that was the great gift of yesterday, is it basically says, through different looking techniques, be the awareness itself. Be the awareness itself, not the objects. And what that does is this ego, which I'm not a big fan of the word because it has such a negative valence, but this focused idea that we are this thing, mainly this thing, that we are where our senses are, that this is who we are, that is it. And as you know, that thing is temporary. It'll be there as long as you have a body, but it is not eternal. And all the sages and saints say there is something about you, something that is even more real than that because it endures. And that is what the attention that I'm trying to draw your attention to when you do this. And you open. And that still thing that's always already been there. You don't have to go get it. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to become good enough. It's just been sitting there all the time. I think Hitler had it. And some politicians in our country have it. That's a joke. And this whole thing, this awareness, we're not aware of that. And because we're not aware of that and we can't touch into that, what we can't seem to do is let go of our grievances. We can't let go of our attachments. We can't let go of our needs. And we become obsessed with getting our needs met. And needs is in quotation marks. So this awareness allows for spaciousness. Now, use your eyes. I'm going to remind you. Come back to the full field of vision. You know, if you look at it, you get your fingers out here, it disappears, right? Comes back in. That's about where you should have your attention, right about there, wide open. And you know, we talk about people who are spiritually wide open. Don't we like hanging out with them? Sometimes they're too much, really, but you know, they say, let your mind be open, but not so much that your brain falls out, you know? But we're opening to this experience, and we're not closing in on our practice way of seeing the world. And this practice way of seeing the world, we came by naturally. And that's why I hate to make it such a negative thing, why the ego is not such a bad thing. It's fairly functional. And what I'm going to equate the ego with is this name that we have given ourselves, this I. I do this, I do that. And we don't even know what that I is. And often when we look for the I, we can't find it, but we still use it. And I think if you start to think of the I as rather than a thing, a being, think of it as a location of awareness. It's a coordinate in consciousness. It's not really separate, it's just a place in consciousness. Your I is where your consciousness is at this point, and your consciousness is not completely separate from all consciousness, but it's named to be here, I. And we got that training because when you were a little baby and you were as wide open, you didn't have anything but peripheral vision. You were just like, duh. And everything was amazing. You didn't even know that your hand was your hand. It would just go, where'd it go? It's back. This is wide open. And so you needed to grow up and to be somebody, right? And so your parents said, they gave you a name. And they kept calling you until you got it. Oh yeah, I'm Jane. Oh, I'm Jane. And I understand that sometimes babies don't even, they start off by saying, Jane wants a cookie, right? Because they haven't got this concept of I, but once they get it, then they can shorthand so much. And they can say, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And gradually they learn how to use this body, and then that becomes attached to I. It's like Velcro. Now it's a body, and now toys. My toy, right? And they become attached to the I, and this I grows in its shape, and you have a story. Oh, I fell down as a kid, or my mother abandoned me, or I won the lottery. All things that have happened to me. No, just kidding. This thing is attached. Now we keep adding to the I, and so it seems more real than before. But it was just a location at one time. It just kind of said, oh, that's where consciousness is. But now it has all these attachments and these aversions. I don't want that to happen again. I want this to happen. This makes me feel good. And who is this me? This me is I am that, right? To awaken or to remember or to come back into your other self is what this yogic practice is about. It's like, okay, so that's what we became. We became this thing that is attached, that's small, that dies, that has to have things a certain way to be happy, that remembers grievances against other people, that is embarrassed, that is lonely, etc. This I has all those things. We came by it naturally. Our culture, and I think most, if not all cultures on the earth, do a great job of giving you an I. And now you have one. Certainly if you live in this country, you have one. And it has some things that are really important to you. It's like your history, your identity. You think this is who you are. And for functional reasons, yes, it is. And who has helped you get that? Everybody else. And so if you go around saying, I'm God, they're going to look at you strange, because they've already convinced themselves and you that you are that little thing, right? I saw this thing about dating one time, and they put people in a room, and on their back they put a number 1 to 10, right? And they said, find your mate. And oddly enough, all the ones found the ones, and all the twos found the twos, et cetera, et cetera. It's by agreement, right? We all agree on what you are. So you live in a world that doesn't exactly help you stay in this wide open space. It's really dedicated to you being something separate and over there, and being judged, and you accepting that judgment so that you can function in it. It's not easy being a human being. And I think that's why it's not so easy. Right? Not because, especially now that we have cars and air conditioning, it's not that hard, really, physically. But it's hard mentally, because we're separated and we suffer. And the suffering is coming from this separate sense of self, this I that is a thing rather than a location in consciousness. And so the yogic techniques are techniques to have that spell broken. And so one way of thinking of it is that you're an infant, and then gradually you move into being an adult, and then you kind of have to reverse the process and at least add back in this wide open, spacious, fascinated, non-conditioned beingness back into the I-ness. And that's what awakening is that you come back into, as Jesus said, lest ye become like a child, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. You will never awaken, we'll say in this context. if you don't come back to being wide open, innocent, fascinated, not all about your preferences, not all about what you want or didn't want, but wide open again, letting the world happen and you going, I am fascinated by it. And you have no control as a baby. And when you get old, you have no control, right? St. Paul said that. When I was a young one, they showed me where to go. As I was a man, I went where I wanted to. But as I get old, they wrap me up and they take me places, right? And on the scope of the world, how much do you control? Your little area. But there's so many things. I talk to people all the time who are radically upset about what's happening politically. No offense, but I don't think you're going to change it by yourself. You can be upset or you cannot be upset. And being upset doesn't mean that you're that much more aware than the next person. It just means you're upset. And so the child doesn't get upset. The adult gets upset. And the enlightened person doesn't get upset. It is what it is. And we've learned as an awakened being to let it be so. So I think these practices of yoga, in essence, is saying, become that child that Jesus was talking about. Become the one who is fresh and new and alert and fascinated by the world, but not putting our overlay of what we have conditioned ourselves to think and feel is the only way we could be happy. And the pursuit of happiness, which is constitutionally, well, the Declaration of Independence, we are obliged to do in this country, has been about this section here, and therefore we have overlooked that this is how you actually get there. When you become open-hearted, when you are compassionate to others to the point where you recognize that their suffering is your suffering, when you can sit in meditation and feel the presence of the one as you, when you sit in meditation and you sit long enough that you watch those thoughts that you thought you were so dedicated to come and go and come and go and come and go, and you go, wow, they don't mean nothing, do they? They are just my thoughts. How wonderful. It's not required that I change things. It's required for me to accept, to be open, and not to judge someone else, and not to judge myself, but to show compassion for myself, to be kind to me, to be a friend to me, and then a friend to others. And maybe you will wake up to this by reading and studying and being wise. Or maybe you'll do it through selfless acts of service. And maybe you'll do it by doing all those things. But that is the goal, and not endless attention to the middle part of your life. Not your preferences. You know, it's like your parents knew that. They said, I don't care what you're saying, do what I tell you to. Right? And this is kind of the same thing. Okay, well, that got you to here, let's get you over here. Don't care too much what you're thinking. Go do the right thing. And in yoga, of course, they would say, you know, to prepare your mind to be able to be adjusting and alert enough, then don't do things that make it harder. Eat well, get the right amount of sleep and exercise. Don't steal from somebody. Don't lie. Don't harm others. The basics. Your parents taught you this. Don't overindulge. These are the don'ts. The do's are do meditate and pray. Do acts of kindness and service for others so that you realize that you're not the only thing in the world. Love as best you can, and make yourself vulnerable to the things that happen when you love. Watch the world change and know that it will always keep changing. Give generously, because when you give generously, you disappear as the most important thing, and you recognize it is the flow of things that is what life is about, not grasping and holding on to everything. So you give kindness, you give love, you give attention, you give your time to others, you give your money, you give your joy to others. It is the flow. We are not an it. We're awareness, and where awareness moves. So don't get stuck on trying to gain happiness. Give it away. Be in the flow. Let your life be part of all of life. You never were separate. There's no existence without the rest of the ecosystem we live in. So that's true on the physical, and that's true on the spiritual. Let your life be lived wide open with joy and the possibility of seeing that you are awareness itself, a part of the awareness that is everywhere, the source and the destination of everything. And that's who you really are. What a trip. Let us pray. Just see if you can have your eyes closed and feel your body. We'll do another thought experiment. Just feel your body. Is it as you imagine the sensations in your body? Where are you feeling anything? And is that in space? Are the sensations in one part connected to the other in the same shape you remember or you imagine you are? Perhaps it's more of a mystery than you think to be a human being, to be you. Where are the sensations? With your eyes closed, what shape are you? Let us be new and fresh, aware to the things that are about us, that flows through the body, the thoughts that flow through the mind, and recognize it is a consciousness that is aware of that, and it's not all that separate from everything else. Now, before we leave, let's touch into love and open up. And these words are also true. You are loved, made manifest, and so it is.